The books on the second shelf over my right shoulder are the books of, in my opinion, the best close-up card magician and entertainer there has been. That is Mr. Harry Lorayne, who on May 2020 celebrates his 94th birthday. And I'm very proud that I've contributed magic to his magazines and books over the years. And I'm also very proud that I've just managed to interview him for you to enjoy. And there's some very funny stories he tells, poignant stories, good advice, good tips. And interspersed amongst the video, which is an internet video, will be some of his tricks and routines. Do I seem excited on the video? You bet I do, because I'm a fan and I'm a good friend of his. And I'm enthusiastic, so if I seem like I'm a little gushing, do excuse it, but it's from the heart. So here's my interview with Harry Lorayne. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with an absolute legend in the business. Harry Lorayne needs no introduction because he is a legend, and he's my hero and my friend in this business. And if it wasn't for Harry, I wouldn't be in this business. It's as simple as that. So welcome, Harry.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to see you, Paul.
Well, thank you. Good to see you. You know, the last time I saw you was at your 90th birthday.
That's right, four years ago.
4 years ago, and I took a flight to fly into New York. I came to your afternoon party, and I got a flight, and I came home again.
I know, and I appreciate that. Was terrific.
It was wonderful. It was lovely to see you, and I still talk about it. You know, what I wanted to ask you is, Harry, you know, you've been interviewed by the world's best people like Carson and Dick Cavett and so on, Michael Parkinson in the United Kingdom, and all the questions about you starting out, I think, have been asked many times. But the questions I'd like to ask you about the publishing and your books and your success starting at the beginning. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. Any question you ask is fine, and I hope I remember the answers, Paul. Like I say, growing old sucks. But let's go.
Well, okay. Well, you know, I'm excited here, so I think my exciting. I shall probably calm down in a moment, but I feel excited to talk to you and ask you these questions. I want to take you back to the mid-70s when I was a teenager. This is a funny story, and you would probably call it a vignette. My mother gave me a book, and here it is. And this is your book, The Secrets of Mind Power.
Of course, that's the second book I wrote for the public.
Right. Now, the funny story is that this is my favorite non-magic book. And I read it on a regular basis, and I recommend it to magicians worldwide. Now, when I then first found your magic via close-up card magic, I said to my mother, and you talked about this in Apocalypse, I said to my mother, there are two Harry Loraynes.
Did you really think it was another guy?
I did. I really did until I realized the writing was so similar, you know.
Right.
But that was a funny story. And I'm going to surprise you now with something you probably haven't seen for a long time.
Now, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
This is the copy I have. I think. Yeah.
That's amazing.
You know, that's the first writing that I actually did for other people, for the.
And can you tell people watching, because you had a television show, didn't you?
Do you want to know how that came about?
Please, yeah.
I was doing table magic at a place in New York City called Billy Reed's Little Club. It was a place where a lot of celebrities came into, you know, after they finished work. Like in those days, the movie theaters on Broadway had live entertainment between the movies. I remember meeting Eddie Fisher because of that, because when they were through working there, They would come to Billy Reed's Little Club to eat or have a drink or whatever. I met a couple of the Roosevelt people there, Faye Emerson with Mr. Roosevelt, because they were like seeing each other at that time. Frank Sinatra used to come in. Frank Sinatra was good because I had a choice when I got this job, which is another story. Richard Himba helped me get the job there. And I had a choice whether to get a salary or to work on tips.
Right.
I decided on tips. And one of the good reasons that was a good choice, because Frank Sinatra carried only $100 bills.
Right.
That's it. So if he tipped you, it had to be $100 bill minimum. So I had made a good choice. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this, a lot of good things. I was very young, it's all blending in my mind, Paul. I must have been 19, 20 years old. And I met Victor Jory there. That changed my life a little bit. That's another story. Of course, he changed my thinking from doing magic for a living to memory for a living. So that was a pretty good plot point. Anyway, I met another couple by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Jack Buckholz. Jack Buckholz was a TV producer. He said to me, after I had done my thing at his table, he said, Harry, can you do some of these tricks for children? Paul, in those years, I said sure to anything. I said sure. I didn't know whether I could or not. I said sure. I figured, what have I got to lose, right? What difference does it make? Anyway, trying to make a long story short, he got me an appointment with a man by the name Mr. Lax, L-A-X. Mr. Lax was the owner of a company called Marlin Teens. It was a candy. It was a direct ripoff of M&M's.
Right.
And what ended up, I got an audition with him at his office where there were a bunch of desks and he called in a lot of people. What I did, I remember this pretty well. I wanted to make sure that I left a good impression. So I met all the people in the room and I memorized their names.
Right.
So while I was working and I did a trick with this candy, if you know M&M's, they're little candies, and I made them appear or disappear. I forgot I did some magic with the candy. And I was calling everybody by name. The way my mind works, I figured if I call them all by name, even if I louse up the tricks, they're going to like me, right? Because I remember their names.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, I got the job, and Mr. Lack said to me, write me a show you can do, let's say a 15-minute show for television. And I did. That became the Professor Magic Show. What I wrote, I wrote that I owned a candy. I was a retired vaudevillian who now owned a candy store. That was the whole point, because we wanted to show his candies. I knew he wanted me too. And of course, as I said, I was 19 and 20 years old. I don't know if it shows on this, but what they did, I wore glasses, which I didn't need at that time. But I was in the Army, Paul. They grayed my hair. I say this as a joke. They put more gray in there, and I said I couldn't get it out. That's why I look the way I look now, because at that point I had jet black hair. I was a young guy. Anyway, I got the show, and that became the Professor Magic Show, doing magic for kids. It was a 15-minute show, and it ran for quite some time, and it got some good reviews and etc.
Yeah.
And like I said, that was the first time. What happened here, Mr. Lax was a very strange guy, but we got along okay. He asked me to write this, and he wanted to give it away if people came to a movie theater with an empty package of Marlin Teens, they got one of these free of charge.
Oh,
that was the point.
Yeah.
And he sold things on the back. I was very young and very naive, Paul. My name is nowhere on this. It just says Professor Magic.
Yeah.
So he was making money on it, selling magic stuff that he bought, I guess, from, I don't know, maybe Tannins or Rabbits or Holdens, I don't know.
And so I suppose that at a similar time in the 50s, you were then writing magic for Hugard's, am I right? Hugard's Monthly?
No, I wasn't writing that. What happened with Ugards, I knew, I ended up knowing Gene Ugard. He had a show in Coney Island
Hmm.
where he was there personally a lot of the time. I don't know if he was there all the time, but he was there a lot of the time. And I was living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which at that time was a ghetto. And I don't want to go into that. I had a terrible upbringing. One of the luckiest things in my life is that I got out of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I used to jump on a trolley car. I didn't have a nickel to pay for it, so I jumped on the back, hitched a ride to Coney Island, and I would spend time with Gene Ugard.
Right.
And I don't remember, again, these are, going back decades ago, Paul. And what happened, there was a guy by the name of Fred Browie, Braue. The Browie passed there. He did some things in magic. I never met him personally, but we became telephone friends. And he's the one that once asked me, can you send us a trick for You God's Magic magazine? Right. And I believe that was the first printing of my routine out of this universe.
Right, yeah.
And that was about 1952, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So in that period of the 1950s, then we move forward. Now, I remember somewhere in the mid-70s, I went to a magic club meeting when I was a teenager, and in the raffle, I won close-up card magic.
Oh, yes.
So that's how I started in card magic, because prior to that, as a young boy, I read all the general text like Royal Road and Expert Card Technique, and I'd never read a book up until your book that inspired me. And it wasn't just the magic, it's your writing style that makes people feel like you are sat next door to them, teaching them personally. So let me just show the folks here. This is my copy from 1976. And as you've noted before, that 1976 is a lie, isn't it? It should be 62.
No, that must be the second or third printing.
That's right, yeah.
Does it say that? Because it came out in 1962.
That's right, yeah. So this was they shouldn't have put that there, should they?
I lost you.
They shouldn't have put 76. It should say 62, shouldn't it?
Of course.
Yeah. But anyway, so can you tell me?
Paul, it just said something about the account being unavailable. Are you hearing me okay?
I'm okay. Are you okay?
Yeah, okay.
So could you please tell me and the watchers, when we eventually get to showing them, how did you approach Lou Tannen, or did Lou Tannen approach you?
You mean for close-up card magic?
Yes, yeah.
Let me tell you I'll tell you what happened, exactly what happened. I was up at Tannen's. I used to go there every Saturday, as a lot of the magicians did. Well, one day I was up there on a weekday. Nobody else was there, just me. And there was a guy by the name of Jimmy Herpick. Jimmy Herpick worked for Lou Tannen. Right. He was a very nice guy. We became good friends, and he was always behind the counter. Lou Tannen was a lot also, but Jimmy Herpick mostly would deal with the customers.
Right.
What happened this day, there were one group of people, maybe 6 or 7 people. I don't know if they were one family or what, but they were all crowded around the glass counter that used to be the counters up at Tannen's. And Jimmy Herpick was doing magic for them. I guess trying to sell them things. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I came up there. I forget why. It was a weekday. I usually didn't go up there on weekdays, but I must have been in the neighborhood. And anyway, I walked over and sort of joined that crowd to watch Jimmy doing magic. While he was doing it, Lou Tannen stuck his head out from the back room and he said, "Jimmy, I need you." So Jimmy turned to me and said, "Harry, can you come around to the counter and keep these people entertained while I see what Lou wants?" I said, "Sure." I walked around. He gave me the deck of cards, and I started to do magic for these people, and Jimmy left. Well, I kept doing, and I get involved, Paul. You may know that when I start to do, there's a saying in magic. It's very hard to start Harry Lorayne, but it's harder to stop him, So I was going on doing magic, and I realized afterwards that Jimmy and Lou were sticking their heads out from the back, just watching. In
Right.
other words, they didn't stop me. Okay, I came to a point, or I forget exactly. Jimmy came out. He said, "Thanks a million, Harry," and he sold some stuff to these people, and they left. And now there was nobody there, and that's when Lieutenant or Jimmy, or both of them, said to me, "Harry, we saw some of the card magic you were doing. Can you write and teach that stuff?" Well, like I said to you before, Paul, I said, sure. I said, I said sure to anything. And this was in 1962. I had already written a book for the public on memory, which sold, that's another story. It sold millions of copies, Paul. It's called How to Develop a Superpower Memory.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'll go off on a little tangent. I got a $500 advance. And I was scared out of my mind because I thought that if the book didn't make that money, I would have to give it back. I really thought, I was going to say I was so naive. The word is really stupid, But anyway, that was the deal. I got a $500 advance. It started to sell. There was a guy by the name of Eugene Schwartz. He's long gone. He wrote a 3,000-word ad for the book. I wrote the top caption, where it said, "Give me one evening and I'll give you a push button memory." I wrote that line that appeared on top of his full page ad that finally appeared all over the world.
Yeah.
And he wrote the 3,000 words. Now, why am I telling you this? It started to sell millions of copies. I was getting a penny a book.
That's
A penny. After it went on for a while, I got a little smarter. I started to yell and scream. They doubled it. I got 2 pennies. So that was the story with how to develop a superpower memory. So anyway, the reason I mentioned that, I had already written a book, and it seemed, at least I was told by the publisher, Frederick Fell, who also became sort of a personal friend, and I wrote the other book that you mentioned for him also, Secrets of Mind Power, afterwards. That's another story, because I thought I had said everything I had to say in the first book. And so I had written a book that came out in 1956. So when Lou Tannen and Jimmy Herpich said, "Can you teach some of those tricks we saw you do, blah, blah, blah," I said, sure. That's what happened. The deal I made again with Lou Tannen was not very smart. I got a 10% royalty for 2 years. I didn't know it was going to go, that it would become a classic, for God's sakes. Yeah. But again, stupid, because after 2 years, I stopped getting royalties, and I wrote 3 other books for him.
Yes.
I wrote Personal Secrets, My Favorite Card Tricks, and Dexterity. That's it. All for Lou. That's it.
The people here, that's what they are, folks.
Yeah. It was after the 4th book, Dexterity, that a little bit of brain power came to be. And I said, I'll write the next book myself. And that became Reputation Makers.
Yeah.
And after that, all magic books I published myself.
And Harry, I mean, it's what is wonderful is that, for my part, going back to the 70s, I purchased, or I'd won Close-Up Card Magic. And I'd seen that you were on a bill in a convention somewhere. And I was a very shy, nervous boy and very anxious. And I never said hello to you because I was too anxious and too shy. But I went to this convention and I walked past lots of very well-known card magicians doing card magic in the corners of the bars. And all these guys were sat there with their head bowed low, with 2 or 3 people watching them, very blandly performing their magic. And then I heard in the back room about 200 people shouting and screaming, and in the middle was you. And you were entertaining them. You were entertaining and making people smile and laugh, and you were engaging. You were fast-paced. You were just everything I think an entertainer should be, specifically with a pack of cards. And I remember then thinking, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it was
It's interesting, Paul, and I've written about this. When I started to do my memory act, starting in 1956 when I wrote the first book, How to Develop Superpower Memory, and I started a year or two after that. The dates are becoming a little vague in my mind. My wife and I, Renee and I, did a memory act for 20 years. It ended, Paul, I go off on tangents a lot, so forgive me, but I usually come back to the original. I said 20 years, and it ended because Renee, who used to introduce me on stage, after one appearance, we were in the car driving home from the show that we did, and she said, "Hon, I don't think I ever want to say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, again."
Here's a fellow. You're going to make him a name for this man.
I'll make up a name, yeah. Look, this man's name is Mr. Fleming.
Mr. Fleming.
Yeah, now the first thing you have to do is make the name meaningful. There's so much more to this than I could do in a short time.
He's got a bushy mustache. Would that help?
Yes, it will. But first make the name meaningful. Think of flaming, let's say. Flaming is enough. There's that reminder principle to remind you of Fleming. Now use the mustache or the
Yeah, but if
widow's
I did
peak.
flaming and I met him, I'd say, you're the gay guy, all right? Wouldn't that...
Gay guy is all right. It's better than hey guy,
Yeah,
which
okay.
is what we usually
So,
do.
flaming, all right.
Of course, so that'll remind you of Fleming. But look what I've made you do. See, I say, and I've said for years that even if my systems don't work, they must work.
Yeah.
Sounds contradictory, but it's true because look what I forced you to do. In order to do that little thing I just taught you, you had to listen.
Yeah.
Most people don't listen. They don't forget names. They don't hear them in the first place.
So you say that he's got a flaming, large mustache, Fleming,
and that'll
flaming.
remind you of Fleming. Sure.
Okay.
Let's try another one. Here,
Now,
how about
here's a track-
Tropiano?
here's an
That's
attractive-
Miss-
what's her name?
Tropiano.
Tropiano.
Tropiano. Now, make it meaningful. Think of throw piano. You're throwing a piano. Look at that strong chin.
Right.
Look at those good character lines from nose to corners of mouth. If you see pianos being thrown out of that, throw piano.
And sometimes the more ludicrous the word
Definitely.
picture, the easier it is to remember.
Exactly
Yeah.
my point, that I want the face to remind you
Throw a piano.
of
all right.
the name.
All right, now here's a fellow that has got a receding hairline. He's wearing...
I'm going to give you a tough name here.
This will be the last one we do because we don't want to...
Okay, all right. His name is Puck Shiver.
Puck
Yeah,
Shiver.
it's spelled with a lot of C's and Y's and Z's, but think of it. Think of a hockey puck on the ice shivering. Puck, shiver. Yeah. Now, see that puck coming out of that forehead, all those sideburns. Huh?
Now, this sounds silly, but this is why it works.
Yeah,
This is
exactly
why it works.
Why don't you mix those up and see if you remember it now, those three? Three is not really, a good test.
All right, just Mr. Do you people
Do
know?
you know it?
Mr. Fleming.
Yeah.
All right, now what are you going to do with this? Tropiano, all right? And? Bathsheba, because they're silly word pictures and easy to remember.
And I do that, incidentally, let me qualify now. I'm going to go out and try to do this in the audience
Right.
with, I don't know, a couple of hundred people.
Right.
And people will say, why do you want to remember that many? The answer is you don't. I teach you how to do it, so it's like swinging 3 bats to help it make it easy to swing one.
We're going to take a break, and then Harry's going to go into the audience. Well, you go right now.
Should I do it right now?
You do it right now, Harry. We're going to turn the lights on.
Okay. All right, why don't we do it this way? With the few people who gave me their names at any time today, would you just rise at your seat so I can see? Oh, my Lord. Okay, I'm going to try to, not only do I want to remember your faces, I also want to remember I want to remember both. So what I'll do is I'll call your name and point to you, and then if I'm right, you can sit down, and I'll do it as quickly as I can, okay? Starting from here, that's Miss Morse, Mr. Hughes, Miss Sprague, Miss Zamost. Did I say that right? I think I said it better than you do. Okay, right over here, it's Miss Otto. This is Miss Blythe, Miss Emmeling, Miss Norn. This is Michael Norn. This is Mr. Lynch. Right over here now, this is Miss Herzman. This is Mr. Lacroix. I knew I'd have trouble with yours. I'll get to it in a minute. Mr. Halton, Mr. I want to make sure I get Tellifer. Did I say that right, Mr. Tellifer? Okay, I'll get to you in a minute. Right here, it's Mr. and Mrs. Mears. This is Mr. Spear. Mrs. Spear, first name Silvestri. She told me they didn't know how to spell Sylvia, I think. Silvery. Okay, right over here, Miss Alter, Mr. and Mrs. Urban. Miss Spransky. Am I going too high up here so I don't want to confuse Mr. McCusick and Mr. Batone and Mr. Barker? Those are the cameramen. See, I think I I'll get to you in a minute. I figured that way they'll make me look taller, see? Now, right over here, it's Mr. and Mrs. DiBiase. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mr. and Mrs. Fernandez. Mr. and Mrs. Skirta. No, save it for the end. Right, Mr. and Mrs. Warofka, right? I'll get to you. Right over here, Mr. Eager, Miss Boyd. You took your jacket off. You look different. He said, hi, Mom. Okay, Miss Zellman, Miss Kelman, Miss Legg, Miss Schwartz, Mr. Dodge, Mr. Billings, Mr. and Mrs. Kilgore. Those are the Mildners. Mr. Mildner, Mrs. Mildner, Wayne Mildner. Why? I'll get to you in a second. I didn't forget your name. I didn't forget you standing, but I didn't forget your name. Mrs. Maddox, you changed seats. Oh, okay. Mr. Maddox, you're allowed. Right over here, Miss Hall, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Mr. and Mrs. Herrera, Mr. and Mrs. Adair, Mr. and Mrs. Puckert. I hope I said it right. Okay, whoops. Funny, I broke my leg. Eklund, Mr. and Mrs. Eklund, Mr. Hatcher. Right in this area, I got 1 minute, so I'm just going to try to, because I want to, I got to get that one. Miss Klosserath, Mr. and Mrs. Young, Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, did I get it right? Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, okay, Miss Albarelli, Miss Wood, Miss Forget, Mr. Sawasa, and Miss Sawasa, Mirabile and Webb, and I think I hate to leave you all standing there. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, sit down. I say, Mr. Moore, have 30 seconds. Okay, I've got to call. I'm sorry I don't have time to get you. Pentecosta is such a good, Mr. LaRiviere. Did I get it right? Mr. LaRiviere. Get it.
That's amazing. Harry, that's amazing. Amazing stuff. I should point out that these people were not arranged. Harry went out briefly this afternoon, introduced themselves, and we didn't put them in any particular order. It's an amazing demonstration.
Well, thank you, but, I do want to qualify and say that anybody could do it. I like to brag and say that I'm the
I
only
can't
guy.
forget to do this or I'm out of a job. We'll be right back.
Because she'd been doing it for 20 years. We traveled all over the world doing it. She thought it was time we had a child.
Right.
That was the point. And she never did say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, again. I had to change the whole concept of what I was doing, which is another long story. If we have time, I'll tell you about my move from doing a memory act to becoming a speaker. Big difference. My salary went way up, and I didn't have to carry two large blackboards that were making me feel like death of a salesman, carrying those darn things. So anyway, that's what happened. I started to tell you this because you told me about me entertaining. When I started to do the act, I lost count of how many people tried to do my act, just stole my act. I used to see people sit in the audience with a legal pad, copying whatever I was saying. As far as doing the things I did on stage, the memory stuff, I taught it in books. Anybody could learn to do it. I'm teaching it. But they were teaching my act. But what happened, and here's the point, Paul, they all put their audiences to sleep. They all disappeared. And that's the point. What could be more boring than standing on stage and remembering things? I mean, give me a break. What the heck is... I once wrote this. I said, I don't care if you flap your arms and fly around the room. If you're not entertaining people, you're going to put them to sleep. And that's what these rip-off artists did.
Yeah.
I wrote this also. My media for entertainment were two things, magic and memory. But they were just medias. Basically, I'm an entertainer.
Yeah.
Those things helped me be an entertainer.
Yeah.
When I was very young, Paul, I wanted to be Danny Kaye. I don't know how many people remember Danny Kaye now. He was a great singer, storyteller, comic. As a little time went by when I was a boy and I wanted to be Danny Kaye, I realized that I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, and I couldn't tell jokes. I'm a good ad-lib guy, but I can't tell jokes. That's the point. When I was doing the memory stuff, I'm getting laughs while I'm doing it. I'm entertaining. That's the point, which a lot of these rip-off guys didn't realize.
And I think that's a big point, isn't it? Because it's very rife in card magic, where guys do very good tricks, very good routines, but they are, some of them, not all obviously, but some are so dull. So, and I don't understand why they think it's okay to look at the floor, or they don't engage. They don't remember people's names, and they
Yeah,
look like they'd rather be elsewhere.
yeah. I'll give you a good example of that, Paul, with a name that all magicians know, Ed Marlowe.
Mm.
Ed Marlowe was a terrific card guy, but you just reminded me of him. He did not know how to entertain an audience. He got involved with his own magic.
Yeah.
So when you said look at the floor, he didn't look at the floor. He looked at his own hands and the cards. And he was terrific. But he's putting audiences to sleep. They're not interested in that. They want you to look at them, make them laugh, make them pay attention.
Yeah.
He lost track of the audience.
Yeah.
He got so involved in his magic.
Yeah.
And Marla, we became very good friends. And again, if you don't mind me going off on a tangent, Paul, a lot of times, every time I was in Chicago, because I used to do appearances there, I would go to the restaurant where all the magicians would meet, and Ed Marlowe was usually there, sitting silently, smoking his cigar, okay? And a bunch of other people that became pretty well known. Anyway, we became friends, and what started to happen quite a few times, I would see a trick in a magazine, by Ed Marlowe, and it was something I had done.
Right.
For them when and Ed Marlowe was what I used to call when he wrote, he was a phase magician, Phasc. He would teach the trick phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and one of the phases was usually exactly the trick I had done for him.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I started to, with no credit, I started to think about this. And again, I'll cut this long story short. I started to realize that Ed was the kind of person that if you did a trick for him, Paul, and if you fooled him, if he figured it out, he felt he had the right to teach it.
Right. Yeah.
So I realized that if I told him how it was done, then he wouldn't do it. Yeah. And that was the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
My next problem was, how did I know that I fooled him? Because he was a deadpan kind of guy. He smoked I was about to say he smoked a cigar. In those years, he always had a cigar in his mouth, but he didn't smoke it. I guess a health thing that he was not supposed to smoke the cigar, but he always had one in his mouth, and it was straight out like this. This is funny, but it's true. I realized when I finished the trick, and I had pretty good peripheral vision in those days. I could see Ed paying attention. When I finished the trick, if the cigar twiggled like this, I knew I fooled him. And that sounds like a joke. I'm making it up. It's not. That was the truth. I would see this. I guess he got excited and he chewed. I don't know. But whenever I saw that, I said, now, Ed, the way it's done, I got the deck stacked in reds and blacks or whatever. And I taught him the trick, and it never appeared in print by him. Interesting story, true story. It's like you make up something like that, but that's what happened.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, right. So,
well,
but I'm glad you mentioned that you saw me entertain people with the deck of cards.
I mean, in such a powerful way, and it was that particular event was recorded in the magazines in the 70s over here, the various magic magazines, and people didn't take it lightly because for you as an entertainer, it's what you do. But so many card magicians at the time that people had seen in the United Kingdom were dull and boring.
Yeah.
So you came along, and it lifted the spirit of close-up card magic. Can I move along a little bit, Harry? I'm just going to show the people here the books that you were talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Harry's second book, Personal Secrets.
Right.
Then came My Favorite Card Tricks. Dexterity, which I don't think, I haven't got the cover for this, but this is my original copy. This cost £5 in 1975.
£5, man.
It's not much money. And my favourite routine in there, which I still do, is the original version of the indicator.
Ah,
You know,
it's a good trick.
Yeah, not the one, not when you redid it, didn't you? But this is the one. This is the one with the thinking involved.
Right.
And I like that. I think you said it before. It keeps you going when you have to think about where it's going to go.
Right, you exercise your mind a little bit.
Yeah, and it never works out the same. So people can't backtrack it, can they?
Right, exactly.
I want to show you, I mentioned computer before, and I want to show you how our minds can work like a computer if you can, in your mind, try to exonerate, vanish all this smudgy, because I'm going to make a new design on here, which is the one I want you to see. How many of you here in the audience ever heard the phrase magic square? Did you? That's all? Okay. Let me explain it to you. What a magic square is, first of all, the square. Let's talk about the square first. You can make a 3x3 would be a 9 square, 5x5 would be a 25 square. I've got just about enough room to make a 4x4, which is obviously a 16 square. Okay? So this is the word square, and that, this is great chalk, in that two-word phrase. I'm writing with my fingernails. Okay, that's the square. Now, the word magic in that phrase, let me explain it to you. What the mathematical genius, and I'm putting that in quotes, would do is he would ask somebody in the audience to call any number, and then, after about a minute or two of thinking, he would put a number in each one of these squares. The point being that when he was through, every row from left to right would total the number called, and then every column up down would total the number called, and then the two diagonals, there are always two diagonals of the square, would total the number called. That's it. That's why it was called magic. I would like to try that, but I want to try it a little differently. See, I told you before that the mathematical genius, in quotes, would have to think for a minute or two before he filled in the numbers. I have been practicing for years, give or take a day or two, to see if I can't do it without thinking. Without thinking. That's what I want to try. But now, if I pointed to somebody and said, okay, you give me a number, that wouldn't look too good. It'd look like it's a setup. Let's do it this way. Somebody, anybody, usually a man could do this faster, pull out a dollar bill. The first dollar bill I see, I'm going to ask you to throw it. Whoever catches it will give me a number. Whoever, I can't control this, so I see one here. Sir, crumple it up. Mr. Saperstein is to crumple it up. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to throw it either behind you, to the left, right. I don't care. Now listen, whoever ends up with the bill in his hand or her hand is the one that will give me the number. The reason I stress that, I can't control that. Somebody may go for it and hit it, and it'll bounce like a baseball, and somebody else will pick it up. So there's no way I can control it. And the reason I'm using a dollar bill is because it's light. There's no way you can control it. So whenever you're ready, toss it. I've lost it. Where is it? All right. Okay. This young lady, I know. So let's throw it to somebody I done. Yeah, where did it? Somebody. Who's got it? Okay, that gentleman, I don't know. I would rather know that young lady, honestly. But you ended up with it, Mr. Goldberg. Incidentally, just so that I don't get sued or in any argument, that dollar bill belongs to Mr. Saperstein. He's sitting right here. I am now off the hook. I'm off the hook. Mr. Goldberg, here's what I'd like you to do for me. Don't worry about the bill. Listen to me. I would like you to think of a number, think of it, don't say it out loud, between 34 and 100. Now, let me tell you why I'm giving you those guidelines. You cannot, with a 16 square, do a magic square with less than 34. Well, you can. I want to be truthful, but you'd have to use fractions, and I don't want to get into fractions because then to test me would be a drag. You'd need a calculator, okay? So let's keep it above 34, and I think up to 100 is long enough. Otherwise, I won't have room in the squares for the numbers. So let your mind go up and down that ladder, Mr. Goldberg, seriously, between 34 and 100. Finally settle on one number. Make it a high one. Make it tough, any way you like, but get it clearly in mind. The reason I want you to get it clearly in mind is when I tell you to, I want you to shout it out loud and clear. And what I want to do, and this is the whole point, I want to start writing on this blackboard the instant you call that number. To make it dramatic, I want to start writing before the echo of your voice dies down. That quickly, okay? And the only way I can do that is if you shout it out loud and clear, because if I don't hear it, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it, then it looks like I'm thinking. Then you'd have to take another number. Do you understand? So mentally, practice shouting it out loud, clearly and distinctly. But not yet. Wait, I got to kind of build myself up for this. I'm kind of sorry I started it, to tell you the truth. But you got that number in your mind? On the count of three, Mr. Goldberg, on the count of three, shout it out loud and clear. And I want to start writing before the echo of your voice dies down. You people, you're the judges. You watch. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
39.
I would have written it twice as fast if we had some decent chalk. But I did start writing instantly, didn't I? And okay. Okay. I tried to do it as quickly as I could. I tried to do a few things. I tried not to repeat any numbers. If you see any repeats, please let me know, and I'll change it, okay? I also want to put down the number that Mr. Goldberg called, because your memories are not as good as mine. So you'll remember the number. Okay, I told you I tried to do no repeats. I think that's what I'm checking. Okay, you remember what I told you about a magic square? I told you that the 4 left-right rows would have to total 79. Let's take one of them, then you can check the rest on your time. Look, 8 and 11 are 19. Add the 1. That's easy, is 20. Add the 20 to 59. That gives you 79, okay? You can check the others. But let's take one column, up, down. I told you all the columns should total to the number that was called. Look, 61 and 5 is 66, and 2 is 68, and 11 is obviously 79. You can check the others. I told you that there were 2 diagonals in every magic square. Let's take one. Look, 8 and 2 is 10. This is easy. Add it to the 60 is 70, to the 9 is 79. You can check the other diagonal. Now, that's as far as most magic squares go, but I'm an extremist. I'll tell you what I also tried to do. I tried to make sure that the 4 corner numbers would add to 79. Add the 10 to the 60 to the 1 to the 8. Not yet. No, not yet. Really. Let it build. All right? So that would give you 79. I also wanted the 4 numbers in each corner to total 79, like these 4. 8, 11, 2, and 58 is 79. 59, 1, 12, and 7. That's 79. These 4 right here is 79. These 4 right here, 6, 64. Wait, no. No, not yet. I love you for it, but hold it. I get so excited. I got to finish this thing. Okay, and let's not forget the 4 center ones, 2, 7, 9, and 61 will total 79. But look, if you take these 2 diagonals, the 58 and the 11, and add them to their mirror image down here, 6 and 4 is 10, add it to 58 is 68 and 11, that's 79. Take these 2 diagonals right here and add them to these 2, that'll give you 79. Take these 2 on top, add them to the mirror image here, that'll give you 79. Take these 2 on the side and add them to these 2, that'll give you 79. Look, in every square of 16, there are 4 squares of 9. Let me make it heavier so you'll see what I'm talking about. You see the square of 9 here, 3 by 3? Well, if you add the 4 corner digits of that, 8, 59, 9, and 3, that'll give you 79. Here's another one right here. Add those, that'll give you 79. Add this one right over here, that'll give you 79. And finally, the lower right quadrant, you should pardon the expression, add the 2, the 12, the 60, the 5, that will give you 79. In other words, any possible direction you can go on that square will give you 79.
Derek Dingle. This is a fantastic book, and it's yet again, did he ask you or did you ask him?
You know, somebody, a friend of mine, I'm trying to think who it was, introduced me to Derek, and he asked me if Derek would show me some stuff, if I would be willing to write him and teach him.
Yeah.
And I said, sure. You know, Derek was very nice. You know, as time went by, I found out a few things about Derek that were unfortunate, not good. You know, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. We became good friends. But I started to be a little careful about things. Like he said to some people, I won't mention their names, that the halo cut was his idea, which was absolutely untrue.
Yeah.
And then the book you just showed, and you can check it, what I tell you, and this is how I found out to be careful. There's a coin trick in there. where the coins are covered with cards, an assembly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he teaches a move where you pick up the card and hide the coin. And he never said he acted like it was his move.
Right.
And of course, I took his word for it. I mean, I'm not going to say to somebody, you're lying to me. And I didn't know any better. When I wrote it, I found out afterwards it was an Al Schneider move, which Derek said it was his. And that's what I started to learn about Derek Dingle.
Yeah.
That he was using other people's moves, like saying the halo cut was his. I mean, come on, And there it is in the book. When we're finished talking, look it up. You'll see that coin move. There's no credit to Al Schneider. I taught it like it was Derek's because he showed it to me as if it was his. Yeah. So that was one of the problems. Other than that, Derek was a nice person. We got along fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I wanted to end that nicely.
Yeah, I mean the magic world is full of problems and issues, isn't it? And it's a small world of very few people doing similar things, I guess. Moving onward again, because we're kind of running out of time for this first section, Harry. But this is beautiful. You remember this?
Oh yeah, the Great Divide. I have fooled so many magicians with that.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what's happening, Paul? All the books you showed, and I put them in. Those books are not available now, but I've rewritten them all in. The title is Lorayne, the Classic Collection. Unfortunately, the first few you showed were in volume 1, and that's out of print now. But what I started to say, a lot of the newbies in magic, I have a feeling that a lot of them don't even know my name. It's amazing. It's a new world. I don't know if the internet has something to do with that or what, but a lot of them, they never heard of my tricks. I don't know if they ever heard of the name in quotes Harry Lorayne. I don't know.
I think they have, and don't worry, Harry. I remind them anyway.
Okay.
I'm your best advertisement.
Good. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
So I'll send you the bill.
I'm not going to pay it, but send it.
I remember, when I in '72, Tarbell.
It's at 72. My God.
72, isn't it? Volume 7, and I don't think many folks know. There's a young lad in here called David Kotkin.
Yeah, you know the story about David Kotkin.
Who's now
he must have. I think when I met him at Tannen's. I knew him at Tannen's. You see each other. And, when I started to do Tarbell, that was for Lieutenant also. And he ran advertisements, I guess. He told people, if you have a trick that you think Harry Lorayne would like for Tarbell, show it to him. He's up here every Saturday, blah, blah, blah. And I think David must have been 17 or something like that. And he said, he was kind of shy then. And he said, Mr. Lorayne, can I show you a trick? And he did. He showed me something with a fountain, and I think it's in the book. And I said, that's a pretty good trick, David, let me think about it. And he said, Mr. Lorayne, if you put that in Tarbell, and if I ever become successful, if I make it, I'll give you 10% of everything I ever earned. He became David Copperfield. Yeah. Oh, gosh. But it is in the book, and it's a pretty nice trick. And I know it's something to do with the fountain pen. It's a long time ago, But David became a good friend.
Yeah. I mean, there's another interesting story that Ken Brook told. And Ken Brook said he had stocked something like 100 copies of this in the mid-70s. And in one day, the next day, the whole lot went in the morning. All 100 copies went. The reason being is because of the silk effect by, is it Foa Yang Tong? The silk effect that Doug Henning did on TV.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Right. And that sold the book.
That sold 100 copies in the first hour of business.
Yeah.
And it's just full of gems.
Yeah, and I wrote it like the other Tarbells, what the sixes thing, method, secret, which I don't usually do, but I wanted it to fit, with the others. And I've gotten people over the decades saying the most important thing, the magic in it is great. Your writing is great, which I appreciate when people tell me that. But they said the most important thing is that darn index you did in the back of the book for all 7 volumes, which was so handy and so important.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing about me writing that book.
Yeah.
When Lou said, "Can you do an index?" And like I told you before, he said, "Sure." I didn't realize what a job it was going to be.
Yeah.
People say it's one of the best darn indexes, blah, blah, blah. And we're talking about David Copperfield. I don't know if you saw this, at the birthday party that you mentioned
Oh, yeah.
before, the people who couldn't make it did videos. Now, I don't know if there were like 40 people.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Dick Cavett and Mel Brooks are on it, or not within the magic world. Well, a lot of magicians from all over the well-known names, etc. Anyway, who couldn't make it to the party, and David was one of them.
Yeah.
So, Penn and Teller, real big names. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this, and I told you before, that David said, "Oh, Mr. Lorayne, if you use this, I'll give you 10% of what our earnings are." So I don't know if you remember this, there's David Copperfield to wish me a happy birthday, and at the end, he said, "Oh, and Harry, your 10% check is on the way."
And that
Plus,
video,
I used to,
what's amazing is that on that video, you've got a thank you from Barack Obama, the President of the United States.
Is that interesting? He sent me a letter.
I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, that shows that you've reached the peak, doesn't it?
Right. Well, Mayor, when he was mayor, and he's still a friend, he was running for president, but unfortunately, he spent $500 million advertising, and of course, it didn't work for him. I'm talking about Mike Bloomberg. And Mike Bloomberg, when we originally met, the first thing he said to me? We were shaking hands, and he said, "You are my hero." He was using my systems to try to learn Spanish. He wanted to learn, so he was using my system to remember Spanish words and their meanings, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, we became good friends while he was mayor. We had dinner together many times, he and his lady friend and my wife, Renee. So he used to send a car for us to bring us to the restaurant where we were having dinner, had to take us home,
Yeah.
etc. So he became a good friend. You mentioned important people. There are quite a, I wrote about this. There are quite a few politicians, well-known politicians, who use my systems, but they have all said to me, "We don't want you to use our names. We don't want people to know that we have a trained memory." Are you ready why somebody told me when I said, "Why not?" You ready for this? They said, "Well, if we're at a Senate hearing at something, we want to be able to say when somebody asks us a question, 'I'm sorry, I don't remember.' And if they know we know your systems, we can't say that." So they didn't want me to give them, to use their name in publicity.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
These are, the stories that you've told me and that you've written about, and in Apocalypse and in your autobiography. One funny memory for me is when you and I went out for a meal in London some 25 years ago. Maybe.
Do you remember the name? Do you remember the name of the restaurant?
The Bombay Brasserie.
There you go. Oh God, good memory, Paul.
Well, good teacher.
Thank you.
And I can remember doing for you a routine of mine, which you put as a front page in Apocalypse, called The Ultimate Transposition.
Right.
And it's not an easy routine. I remember doing it with the cards, 4 signed cards exchanged with 4 cards in the pocket.
Right.
And I can remember getting to the denouement, just about to do the ta-da moment, and the waiter dropped the chutney in my lap.
Good misdirection. Right.
That was funny, and you were so generous and kind. It was wonderful. And I remember when Robert came over, and we looked after him, took him around some quaint English pubs to show him what they were like.
Right.
And we drove around for 1 hour trying to find one that was open.
Oh, right. Did you find one?
I think we did eventually.
Right.
But Harry, I mean, this first part is slowly coming to or quickly coming to a close. It's amazing how time flies. So can I just talk a few more about the early books, and then hopefully I can schedule another meeting with you, maybe straight after this, if it allows. So rim shots, I just love the halo cut, and
Yeah.
use it in so many routines, and I still
Yes.
do Halo Aces and Halo Again. I've been doing them since I was a teenager. For 45 years I've been doing those routines, and this book, I mean, I love them all, but this one in particular is probably my Treasure Island book.
Right.
I love it, and it's just fantastic. And I urge anybody watching, go get Harry's books, borrow them, steal them, whatever you
Even
have to
buy
do.
them.
Buy them, yeah. Buy them. I mean,
I think rim shots, I'm not sure. I think it's in, I hope, the volume 1 of my book, Lorayne, the Classic Collections, is out of print. It's been sold out for a decade. I think that one is in volume 2.
it is,
And
yes.
volume two is my favorite because the first book I rewrote in volume 2 is Reputation Makers, and the first trick in Reputation, and the first trick in volume 2 of the Classic Collection is the Card Shark and the Four Gamblers. And people tell me that trick alone gave them a career.
Yeah. And of course, I mentioned to you on the email, I said to you, your performance of that, let me just show the people, Reputation Makers, your performance that you did on television where it was hot. Can you tell the people about that?
You mean when I was sweating?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's nothing to tell. I did they had cut off the air conditioning. I'm not very sure about the location or why or what. It was some kind of either magic meeting or a show for a lay audience. What I do remember is when they started to televise, they said that the air conditioning was making too much noise, coming across when people were talking. It was annoying. So they said, when I was ready to perform, they said, Mr. Lorayne, do you mind if we shut it off? I said, well, I can't tell you what to do, Well, I started to do a couple of tricks, and then when I got to the ending, there's no way to follow up my version of the Card Shark for Gamblers. And this sounds a little egotistical. I was about to say, not the way I do it. And that sounds a bit egotistical, but you know what? At my age, I don't care. I'm going to say it. I don't care if it sounds egotistical to people. I'm going to say it like it is. And when I got to that, I was already sweating. But when I got to do this, the sweat was showing through my suit jacket. Yeah. It was that hot. I think it was something like 110 degrees in there. And I'm doing this routine. And the people didn't move. They gave me a standing ovation at the end. So that's my memory of it, was the heat aspect of it. But it's one heck of a routine.
It's a heck of a routine, and the performance you gave there is a barnstorming performance.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a master class in entertaining with a pack of cards.
Yeah, yeah. That's what, it's like I said before about a lot of people. I don't know if they know my name, they know my books. My attitude, again, it's going to sound egotistical, but truthfully, Paul, I don't care. How could people who get into magic, particularly card magic, and don't want to walk around with stacked decks or memorized decks, they want to be able, give me a deck and I'll blow your mind. How could they not get my books?
I couldn't agree more, Harry. I couldn't agree more.
You've all heard, I assume you've all heard of stacking a deck. The word is really stuck, but since everybody says stack, I'll use the word stack also, okay? So I'm going to be stacking this deck. The idea, I don't need jokers, okay? The idea is to see if you can catch me, all right? That's the whole point of this. What I'm doing right now, incidentally, is not very exciting. I'm looking for the last ace is what I'm looking for, and I don't really know if I have a full deck here, so bear with me. I just had the aces a little while ago. Here it is, I'm sorry. Okay, let me tell you, there were four men. Four men were playing with a card shark. Now, the first question that should come into your mind is, how did they know he was a card shark? If they knew he was a card shark, they wouldn't play cards with him. Well, that's a very logical question. It has a very logical answer. It seems that this card shark, or Greek, or mechanic, as they're sometimes they're called furniture men. In any case, whatever they're called, he was a little careless this evening. He kept turning the deck face up, and they would see the four aces on the bottom. You see, he would give the deck a fancy cut just like that, but it didn't matter, because when he turned the deck over there, or he would give the deck what is known in the trade as a belly cut, just like this, and then he'd give him a couple of quickies, just like that, but it didn't help, because when he turned the deck over, they saw that finally the four guys looked at him, they said, look, buddy, not that we don't trust you so much, because we don't, but would you mind very much if we put the aces into the deck ourselves one at a time? Well, you know, he couldn't say no, because that would be admitting his guilt, so he very meekly said yes, and this is what the four men did. They put the four aces on the table like that. The first man knew a little bit about cards. He took a few of the cards, spread them into a fan like this. This is called a fan, which is very hard to do with a sweaty deck. Anyway, he spread them into a fan. He took one ace, put it into the fan just like this, pushed it in, closed the fan, squared the cards, and to make sure that ace was lost, he took some more cards from here and put it on top of these cards. He, in turn, handed the deck to the next guy, who took another ace, put it on top of the cards, gave the deck a cut like this, took some more cards from here, put it on top of these, and completed the cut. Well, at this point, the gambler was getting very nervous. He was looking through the cards like this, trying to find the aces, but it was too late, because the third guy took the third ace, put it on the deck, gave the deck a cut. I want to cut about center like that, took some more cards from here and completed the cut. Well, as I said, the gambler was getting a little nervous, trying to find the aces, but it was too late, because the last guy took the last ace, put it on top of the deck like this, gave the deck a cut, took the rest of these cards, put it on the cards, and squared the cards. Now, the card shark said, look, you have lost the aces in the deck in such a way that you yourselves don't know where they are. I demand the privilege of giving the deck two straight cuts. Well, they had a little committee meeting. They said, what the heck, he can't cheat with two cuts. We'll let him do it. So he gave the deck two cuts, and he put the deck on the table just like that. He said, now, look, fellas, the aces are lost in the deck in such a way that nobody knows where they are. He says, and it's getting late. Let's play a very quick but cutthroat game. In other words, we'll play cutting to high card. Whoever gets the highest card wins. However, I am so sure and so confident that I can beat you four guys that not only will I have to cut to a higher card to beat you, I'll have to cut to a higher card of the same suit. That means if you cut to the three of clubs, I won't beat you with the eight of diamonds. It would have to be the eight of clubs. That makes it so much more difficult for me. Is that fair enough? They said, sure. The first man took the deck of cards in his hand, gave it a cut, and turned over a king. Well, the card shark said, look, you have cut to a king. That's one of the highest cards in the deck. I'm going to try to beat you anyway. He was about to cut when they said, look, buddy, we still don't trust you too much. Would you mind cutting with one hand? That way we know you're not cheating. He said, sure. He took the deck of cards in one hand, like this, and he gave it a cut, and of course he got the ace to beat that particular king. Well, at this point, the second gambler said, just a minute, I don't think this is a coincidence. I think this guy is stacking the aces. He said, all I got to do is use a little brain power, a little logic. If he's stacking the aces, where's the most logical place for them to be? I got them now. They got to be on top of the deck. He said, so I'll cut the top card. I'll get an ace. I'll beat this son of a gun. He did that, but believe it or not, he too cut to a king. Well, the card shark said, look, fellas, you insist upon cutting to kings. You insist that I cut with one hand, so I will, and he did. And, of course, he cut the ace to beat that particular king. Well, at this point, the third gambler, who was a very shrewd gambler, said, hey, this ain't no coinky-dinky. He said, this guy is stacking the aces. He said, now, all I got to do is use a little logic. He said, I know they're not on top. I just saw that. They couldn't very well be in the middle. He's not that good. He said, now I got them. They got to be on the bottom, so I'll cut the whole deck over. I'll get an ace, and I'll beat this guy. He did that, but believe it or not, he also cut to a king. Well, the card shark said, look, fellas, you insist upon cutting to kings. You insist that I cut with one hand. He said, now you're getting fancy. Now you're cutting the deck face up. He said, I don't have to do this. But to prove that I'm not cheating, I'll cut the deck face up with one hand. And, of course, he cut to the ace to beat that particular king. At this point, all the four guys got up and started to walk away because the thinking was, hey, we know the guy is cheating. We can't catch him. What's the point? We're throwing our money away. So the card shark turned to the last guy, the one that hadn't cut yet, and he said, my friend, I'll make a deal with you before you go away. First, give the deck a shuffle. The guy said, fair enough. He shuffled the cards. The card shark said, look, I want you to cut anywhere, not top cards, bottom cards like your friends have been doing. Cut the deck anywhere you like, and I'll make a good deal with you. The guy said, fair enough, gave the deck a legitimate cut, believe it or not, cut to a king. Well, the card shark said, I make a deal with you, and I will. You have cut to the last king in this deck. He said, if I can't cut to a card in this deck that will indicate the position of the last ace, I'll pay you all triple what you lost. Is that fair enough? They said, sure. They all sat down again. So the card shark took the deck on one hand, gave it a cut with one hand, and turned over a 3. Well, they all grabbed for the money. But the card shark said, hey, hold it. You misconstrued me. I didn't say that I would cut to the ace. I said I would cut to a card that would indicate the ace. That's a 3. Look, 1, 2, 3. And, of course, he cut to the ace to beat the last king, see? Thank you. I think that should teach you never to gamble with strangers.
You're doing very well, Harry.
It's amazing. You know, I tell people that. I say I've written 52 books. There's an assumption that there's a semblance of intelligence until I face a computer. Really, I feel like such an idiot.
Well, I do as well. I kind of missed computers when I was at school. They were just slightly after my time. So, I mean, I'm going to be 60 next year, Harry.
To be 60 again.
Well, you've known me. I've been corresponding with you since I was 15 years old.
Oh my God! I didn't realize that.
It's a
Boy.
long time. It's for the folks watching. It really is a loving, because Harry just means the world to me, and I will say it until the day I die. It's a joy to be here with you, Harry, and thank you for your support in publishing my Magic in Apocalypse and Best of Friends Volume 3. And again, you took a very shy, lonely boy out of that situation via your books on memory and mind power and magic. And you know, I just wouldn't be here. So, as you once wrote to me, I think you said something like, it's nice to receive bouquets while you're still around to smell them.
That's it, right. Are we recording now, Paul?
We're recording, yes, yep.
I say that a lot, you know, because I say that to people who say very nice things to me, as you're doing, Paul. I appreciate it, you know. You keep mentioning about being shy, etc. I don't know if you know my background. I've written about it in my memoir. Mel Brooks told me to call it a re-memoir. And I wrote about it. I was the shyest kid in the world. I mean, to the point of sickness. I got it from my mother, I guess. She was terribly shy, but I never made eye contact with anybody, Paul. I never spoke to anybody until they spoke to me. That's one of my loves for magic, because that got me out of there. That changed my life.
Yeah.
Was magic.
Yeah, and I think my father, when I read The Secrets of Mind Power, my father was a very gregarious salesman. He was very good at his work, and I suppose you'd call him a kind of a wide boy, or like a shyster type. You know, he was good at what he did.
Right.
I always wanted to be like him, and I read your book on mind power. And 2 years after I read it, he said to me, "Do you know what, son?" He said, "That Harry Lorayne has turned you into a mouthy pain in the arse."
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad. That's funny.
That's funny, isn't it? So, your name was just around the house like constantly, and
Right.
doing your tricks non-stop. I'd be quoting the books and so on and so forth. Talking of your tricks, I did a trickathon, like a marathon, many years ago when I was about 20 years old, and I did a 1 hour act in a magic convention, and every single trick was one of yours. So,
did they go over okay?
They did, and I gave them the real Harry Lorayne energy.
Okay. Amazing. That's terrific, you know.
I also have happy memories of coming to Tannen's in '97 when you recommended me to Tony Spina. And I can remember myself and Michael Vincent coming over. And as we got to the airport, Michael said, I brought somebody with me, and he brought Alan Allen with him.
Ah,
And I didn't get on with Alan at all, and we had nothing but arguments the whole journey and the journey back and so on.
really?
Yeah.
I knew Alan, but we didn't spend much time together.
Yeah. He yeah. I won't speak ill of the dead, but I can remember you telling me a story about you took him to the top of the Empire State just to watch his hair blow around.
Right. Oh, God.
That Tannen's Jubilee in '97, there's a photograph of Michael, myself, you, Howard Schwartzman, and Ken Krenzel.
Yes, I used that in a book somewhere.
That's right. And the photograph was taken by a 14-year-old Josh J.
Ah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a lovely photograph, and that's a treasured memory.
Right. Oh, God. Ken Krenzel was a dear old friend. And so was Howie Schwartzman. You know, I haven't heard anything. I know he was very ill.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't heard anything for a long time. I don't know if he's still around.
Right. I was going to ask you that because last time I saw him was about 7 or 8 years ago, and he didn't look very well then.
Right. No, I don't know. Was it Alzheimer? I don't know what it was.
Yeah. And for the folks watching, we're talking about Howard Schwartzman, not Ken Krenzel, because Ken Krenzel.
Right, Howie Schwartzman. Yeah. What can I tell you? Good, dear old friends. I keep hearing these things. I'm not going to mention any names of people who are younger than I am, who are having these problems, Alzheimer's and things like that.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, you've kept your mind active, haven't you? You don't stop writing, you don't stop thinking, and that's got to help, hasn't it?
I wonder if that had anything to do with it, Paul. Seriously.
Yeah.
I do. I wrote in my memory books how important it was to utilize your mind. I remember the way I said it is that if you leave your arm hanging down for, I don't know, a week, you're not going to be able to use it again. It's going to atrophy. And if you don't use your mind, the same thing is going to happen. And I've written this so many times, I don't know of a better way to exercise your mind than to try to apply my systems.
Yeah, yeah.
And I always wrote, even if one of the things I wrote, contradictory statement, even if my systems don't work, they must work.
Yeah.
And I knew what I was saying. What I was saying is that they forced you, if you just tried to apply them, they force you to strengthen your observation because you had to pay attention.
Yep.
You had to hear a name and look at a face before you could apply my system for remembering names and faces. It helped with your concentration. It helped with your observation, so that even if they didn't work, they made you a better person mentally, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely true. And, I learnt all the systems for your memory systems. And the way they work for me best is at gigs and shows where I remember the customers and I remember the audience names. Because one of the things that bugs me is where a magic performer or a lecturer will have two people up to help. And he asks them their name. And about 2 seconds later, he says, "What's your name again?"
Right, I know. I know. Yeah.
And it's just.
Of all people, it's interesting, names that come to mind. You had mentioned Parkinson before, but I did a promotion for one of my books, or two of my books in England, where I traveled around the area. There was one show, I can't think of the name. I used to get on a train. The show started with a B, I think. I can't think of the name, but I did a lot of the local shows in London. I did the Paul Daniels show, and Michael Parkinson, of course. And I mentioned somewhere just recently that David Frost started to ask me about my systems. I don't know if he used them,
Right.
but I did his show a number of times, both in England and in America, because he was doing the shows both at the same time. He was traveling back and forth.
Yeah, yeah. And
I had just, I'm sorry, I was going to say, I just did 2 interviews with Rudy Tinoco, and I told 2 interesting vignettes about David Frost. We had become good friends over the years, you know. I don't know if you want me to, because it would be repetitious, because I told the 2 stories about David Frost.
yeah, no, please tell. We're all ears.
Oh, really? I mean, it's because Rudy is doing this thing he's calling Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And he's doing it for this other company, whatever, I don't know, where he shows a trick from Apocalypse and then an interview with me.
Yeah.
And I've told these 2 stories. So I'll give them to you real quick. The 2 David Frost things. I did his show a number of times. We became quite friendly. We'd go out after a show and have a drink together and blah, blah, blah. The first thing was kind of funny. Rudy brought it up. He said I had written it in my memoir before I forget, and I didn't. You know, I wrote that book 10 years ago, and I haven't looked at it since. So I don't necessarily recall which items I decided to include. But it seems I included this: how I got drunk on television, and it was with David Frost, because what happened, I was doing a trade show way back in those years. I did a lot of trade shows. And I used to win best of show, and they were paying me quite a bit of money and blah, blah, blah. I was in Detroit, Michigan, when David, how he knew where I was, I don't know. But he contacted me. And the point was, there were 6 booklets, which he eventually sent me, that he had written the foreword to each one of these booklets, and they were called The Bluffer's Guide.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, what it was, how to look like you were such an expert in certain areas where you really weren't. You learned it all from these books. That was the point. He sent me, there were 6 of them, pretty thick little, booklets on different subjects: opera, music, language, etc. One of them was wine. Okay, there were 6 subjects. And he said, Harry, could you do me a large favor? Could you select any one of these books? It seems, because I guess he had a piece of those books, I imagine, and I guess they weren't selling well. He wanted to mention them on his show, and he wanted a rationale. I became his rationale. He said, what I'd like you to do, select one and memorize it for me, and I want to put you on the show as an expert in that subject. Okay. I selected wine. I didn't know anything about any of the subjects, Wine, my son gives me wine. He said, Harry, Dad, do you like it? And I say, after the 3rd sip, I don't care. They all taste the same. So anyway, I memorized the book with words I had never heard before. One that comes to mind is Cru, C-R-U. I don't know how it's pronounced. Probably Cru, I don't know. I don't know what it means, but I learned what it meant in this book. Anyway, we go on the show. He has a real wine expert on, and I am making this wine expert believe that I am as much of an expert as he is, because I'm talking about all the things I had memorized in the book, and I had memorized it almost word for word. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I said the things that I had read. Anyway, that was great. That came across great. Then, after a commercial, a guy dressed in a waiter's uniform wheels out a big carriage full of wine bottles and glasses and buckets and things like that. And it ends up that we were going to do a wine tasting thing. I look at David Frost, because I hadn't been told this. And David kind of shrugs, like saying, Harry, do the best you can. What happened, like I said to you before, after the 3rd sip, I don't care. Well, What I didn't know and nobody told me is you're supposed to take a sip, and what the buckets were for was to spit it out. I didn't know that. So I swallowed it. Well, by the third sip, that guy was saying, oh, the crew and this is whatever, making up things. And I got, because what happened, I didn't realize when the thing was over and everybody got up to walk, I couldn't get up. So I sat in the chair. And everybody said goodnight or whatever. I didn't get out of the chair. Then they came over and took care of me. So that was the first thing, how I got drunk on live television. Okay. That was funny. Now the next serious part, and I wish I could find a tape of this. When David was going to do his last show of his series in America, out of New York City. I think it was out of New York City. He called me and he said, here's what I'd like you to do, Harry, if you can. To end my reign or to end my series, I don't know how long it had been running, I would like for you to remember everyone in the audience. It has to be everyone. But instead of having me, because I had done this on his show a number of times, so he knew what I did. He said, but instead of telling them to be seated, because I asked my audience to stand, I always say with the few people I met, stand up, and I always use the word few because it gets a gasp when everybody stands up. And then I say, as I call your name, sit down. He said, instead of having them sit, I want you to tell them to leave the studio because this is going to be the last thing on my show they're going to see, an empty studio. I said, sure. He said, and we will give you all the time you need to be sure you've remembered everybody. Fine. Okay, comes the day of the show and I meet everybody, as I usually do. I mean, it was nothing new to me. The only thing different was to tell them, after they were standing, is to leave the room, as I call you. And I had to be careful because it was a studio. How can I explain it? 2 sections with an aisle down the center. So I had to call the names at the ends of each row. Otherwise, people would have to be stepping over each other to leave.
Yeah.
So, I had to be careful. And I did it. And sure enough, everyone is leaving. We come to the last person. I think of it, my heart kind of skips a beat. I called the last couple, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, whatever, that I had been near the end of the studio, near the exit. And they leave. And the reason my heart skips a beat, and I think maybe David went through the same thing, at least he told me so afterwards, neither one of us had realized when I finished my thing of calling everybody's name, there's a roar, there's a standing ovation, there's applause. Now, I call the last 2 people, there's dead silence. We had never thought of that. We didn't know what to do.
Oh, yeah.
Fortunately, I'm pretty good at these things because when my heart started to beat again after a couple of seconds, I looked at David and I said, I'm Harry Lorayne, you're David Frost, let's get the hell out of here. And I put my arm around his shoulder, we turned around, and the end of the show was the camera taking our backs as we left.
That's a good way to get out.
Afterwards, David threw his arms around me. He was almost in tears. He said, Harry, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. Because neither one of us had thought, what do we do when I call the last name? There's an empty studio. So the ending, that's my 2 David Frost stories.
And that's the sign of a true pro, to be able to get out of a situation.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I really am.
And I've seen you do that with magic, where I know the routines, and every now and then something may not go as planned, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. I'll never. I wrote this. I will never admit to a mistake. Never. Yeah.
I mean, why should I? I mean, I'll do something else. Let's say the guy started at 5 of diamonds and I down to 9 of clubs. It's the wrong card. What I end up doing while I'm thinking about how to get of it is I do a trick with the 9 of clubs. I'm not going to admit that I made a mistake. Never. That's part of my personality. It's wrong. Why would I want to admit to an audience person that I made a mistake?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I know there's a well-known book out there. I won't say who by, but the author says, if you make a mistake, stop, apologize, and start again. That's crazy.
It's wrong.
It's wrong, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I say, I would never admit I made a mistake. That's like I said to you once before at a different time. I said, you know, if somebody said to me, can you play the piano? I said, I don't know. I never tried. Can you do so-and-so? Sure. I had that. Maybe that was getting over my shyness.
Yeah.
And I think I've already said to you that I was really the shyest kid in the world.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for magic, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Magic changed my life.
Yeah.
It gave me a life.
And you've made the most of it, and you're just a shining example that people are watching this. Well, people will be watching it. You know, folks, you've got to check Harry's stuff out and his writings, because they're just the best. You know, just learn the magic, be inspired by the writing and the teaching, and have a good time with it. Harry, I got a little funny memory for you as well. That you know, about 7 years ago, we lost Aldo Colombini.
We lost who?
Aldo Colombini.
Oh, Colombini, yes.
And he was at the Tannins lecture that I was at, the Tannins Jubilee. And when I arrived on the Wednesday, I said to him, I've just traveled 36 hours, Aldo. I'm really tired. I don't know what the schedule is. I don't know when I'm performing. I don't know when I'm lecturing. And he said, Paul, don't worry. Sit down. I'll get the wine. So Maitre D brought a bottle of red wine over.
Good.
Half an hour, we drunk it. And I said, but when am I lecturing? He said, Paul, don't worry. At the weekend. So we had another bottle of wine. And by that stage,
Right.
There's a tap on my shoulder from Tony Spina. He said, don't forget you're lecturing tonight.
Oh, gee.
So I had coffee. And
Right.
Now that I made up the statement, I got to think of a trick. I got it. No, I'm going to show you the best card trick ever. Watch. Even not with my deck, with somebody else's deck. It's the best card trick ever. You're John, aren't you? All right, John, listen. Cut the deck any way you like. Now, where you just cut, I couldn't tell where you're going to cut, right? So there's no way I can know that card. Is that fair enough? Pick up that card, look at it, remember it, show it to at least one other person. Because if you forget, no, don't put it back there. Put it right here. Do you remember it? You won't forget it. Watch the handling. Look. Fair enough? Watch. I want to really lose your card. Watch. To make sure it's lost. Look. My God, I think I really did. This is I think I really lost the card. As long as John, as long as I really lost it, let me really get fancy here. Look at this. Oh, wow. I mean, your card is gone. There's no way I can find your card. This is embarrassing. And I said I was going to show him the best card trick ever. I'll tell you what, John, I don't think I can find your card from the whole deck. Maybe from half the deck. Cut about half the deck the way you did before. Give it to me. Yeah, that's a little too much. I think you cut about that much before. Maybe from this half I can find your card. No, maybe from half of these. Let me try half of these. The fastest way to get half of these exactly is to do this. This is embarrassing. I wanted to show you the best card trick ever. And now I can't find your card. Maybe, do you still remember your card? Damn. Okay, that means I gotta find it. Hey, no, I gotta take half of these. I'm sorry, John. We'll take half of these. Maybe I can find your card from these. I don't know. Too many. I'm gonna have to try from here. No, look at this. I'm getting down to nitty gritty. That's as far. Whoops. What was your card? What? Well, I'm close, but John, if only you would have selected an ace, it would have been so much easier. You see, that's the best goddamn card trick ever. See, I never lied to you before. You know, that is just about the best card trick.
You remind me of something silly here. You can delete it if you want to. I've gone through things like that, where I drank too much and then all the coffee. Then when I was working, I had to urinate. That's the problem. you know. So you just brought that to mind. But, you know, you have to keep going and do the best you can.
You know, a lecturer's nightmare is, I saw a lecturer many, many years ago, somebody who you'd know, and at the beginning of the lecture, he said, "Excuse me, I've forgotten something. I need to go to the car and get it." So off he went, and we all sat there, you know, looking around, and he came back. 10 minutes later, he said, "I've forgotten something else. I need to come back again." Anyway, this happened 2 more times. In the interval, I went up to him and I said, "You know, what went wrong?" He said, "I had stomachache and I had to go to the toilet."
Yeah,
I mean, that's
terrible.
isn't it? That's a
Yeah.
lecturer's nightmare, isn't it?
You know, it's funny. Again, things come to mind. I remember Renee and I, when we were doing the act together, we were booked for a show, and I got very ill. I had fever and etc. And the reason I mention it, when I was on stage, I didn't feel it. I was fine. When I got off stage, oh my God.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know what the extra heartbeat does or whatever. When I was on, I didn't feel bad at all.
Yeah.
I was interested in doing what I usually do on stage. Before I got on and when I got off, I felt terrible. So that's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never in all the years that I've been doing stage appearances did I have to really say, "You have to excuse me and I have to use the bathroom."
Yeah.
Never.
No.
Not that I can think of. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's. I think adrenaline helps most of us, doesn't it?
I think that's what it is. Yeah. Did you ever have that problem? I don't remember ever having.
I've never had it. And
No.
I can remember a long time ago, I had a proper flu, you know, the proper.
Yeah.
You know, when your body aches and you're in bed.
Right.
I had a show to do, and I got in the car and I got to the show, and 3 minutes before I started, it just kind of clicked into action.
That's it.
I was fine, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Interesting that you tell me this guy had to get up and go to the bathroom. But to each his own.
Nightmare.
Right.
Coming back to the books, Harry, the next one I wanted to talk about is Afterthoughts.
Yes.
Do you know what? I spent months and months dropping playing cards trying to learn the Ultra move.
Yeah. That's one. Boy, I used to fool magicians with that.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. I have arthritis in my thumb. But boy, I fooled magicians with that.
It's a gem, isn't it? It's just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know Michael Vincent uses it on a regular basis for one of his
Right.
readings. You know, he does it very, very well.
Good. No, it's one heck of a move when it's done properly.
Yeah.
I think it's better than the top change. I mean, it's very visible, you know, showing that card. There it is on top, you know. Oh, God, did I fool? I love to fool magicians.
Yeah. Oh, you do that well.
At least I used to. Then I started to put things in books, you know. So in one way, it bothered me a little because I started to do a trick I wanted to put. He knew it because he read it in my book. Right? So I lost that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, it's interesting. I keep saying you changed my life. And God, you know, when I tell people about my background, the kind of shy kid I was, they don't believe me because I have overcompensated, obviously, you know. But boy, they don't believe it, how shy I was. It was the first card trick I ever saw. I was, 10 and a half, 11 years old. That changed my life. So I have a lot of pivot points in my life, and that, of course, was very important.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's such an amazing story you have. I'm just so surprised that nobody's made a movie yet.
All right.
You know.
You know what? You know how I got into card magic, don't you?
I think you told me, but tell people, please.
Well, it's no big deal. I mean, I was the shyest kid in the world, as I told you. There was a park near where I lived. We called it the Pitt Street Park. That was not the name, but it was on Pitt Street, so that's what we called it. It was the Hamilton Fish, some fancy name like that. But anyway, I used to go there most every day after school when I was a little kid because there was a counselor who used to keep us busy teaching us, shuffleboard and paddle tennis and, things that boys mainly would play. And one day it was a rainstorm, or a rainstorm started while we were doing shuffleboard or whatever. And he ran us into a place out of the rain, an enclosure. And it seems he didn't know what to do with us indoors. He was good with teaching us sports, but he didn't know what. He did a card trick. That changed my life. One card trick he did. Because I remember saying to myself, oh my God, if only I could do that. Long story short, I went home. I stole milk bottles to get I lived in a tenement, a 5-story tenement. And in those days, when I was 10 and a half, 11 years old, people used to, I don't know how to explain it. The milkman would come and he would take empty bottles away from the front door and put full bottles there. I don't know how it was arranged. I don't know how the people paid for it, but that's the way it was done. And when I went to a grocery store with a bottle, I think you got 2 pennies or something as a deposit kind of thing. So I stole like 9 or 10 bottles because I think in those days the cheapest deck of cards was like 18 cents.
Yeah.
And I needed a deck of cards, to see if I could figure out this trick that this counselor had done for us. So, I mentioned stealing the bottles. I think time has passed. I think I'm okay. I don't think they're going to put me in jail for stealing those 9 bottles or whatever. Anyway, I figured out the track, came up with 5 different ways to do it. Some better than the way he did it. And I was only 10 and a half, 11 years old. But now here came the next problem. I remember when I wrote about this, I said it reminded me of that cliche, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there at all, does it make a sound? So I was thinking, I'm doing these tricks, but if I don't show it to anybody, does it make a sound? What's the point? Well, for the first time in my life, I started to have to look at somebody and say at least 3 words, pick a card.
Yeah.
That's what started it.
Yeah.
And I started to do that. And after a while, some of my friends that had on the sidewalks of New York where I was doing that trick, they would start to yell, hey, Magish. They called me Magish. Hey, Magish, could you do another trick? I didn't know another trick. That started it. I went to the library, and I started to, learn trick. In those days, Paul, most of the books I found on magic had to do with magnets, wires, threads, and, when I found something that taught a card trick, I would smell the page. It smelled so good, and I'd hug the book and run home with it after I checked out.
Yeah.
That's how important card magic became to me. And like I say, it changed my life because I started to get rid of that terrible shyness. That was like a cage to me. The magic started to get me out of that cage of shyness.
And eventually you can get a girl to smile and go red in her cheeks, and it's...
You know the story about the girl? You just reminded me of something. I don't know if it's the one you're talking about. I was behind the counter. I thought my life was going to be magic. I was going to sell magic. All the years of getting kind of involved in my mind, I'm starting to forget which came first, which came later. But I'm behind a counter. And a friend of mine, I was 16, 17 years old. At that age, I would have made love to a watermelon. I mean, come on. At that age. This guy comes in with a nice-looking young girl. And he says, Harry, would you do a trick for Susie or whatever her name was? And I say, sure. I take a deck of cards, and I have her pick the cards. I have to shuffle it. And, I did something that I learned a lesson from, which I'll tell you afterwards if we have time. I really want to impress this young girl. And as I'm shuffling the deck, I don't know how to say this so you don't have to delete it. She says, if you find my card, I will give you this. And she puts her hand in a part that I can't explain, okay? And my God, okay. Wow, if you find my card, wow. Okay, I really want to impress her. Here's the point of the story. I know her card. Of course, I forced it, whatever. And I got the card on top of the deck. I do a double turnover because I really want to impress her. I want to show the wrong card and change it to the right card. So I say, and there's your card. She says no, and she leaves. Oh, my God. I say, no. Too late. Boy, did I learn a lesson.
Oh, that
because I missed out because I want to show how great, when I say I learned a lesson, that was part of it. For many years I pitched Svengalis. And I used to watch another Svengali pitchman when I was very young to try to learn it. I worked with a guy named S. David Walker. I don't know how many people would know him. He was a pretty good magician. And I have a picture of he and I, when we were both young, where we used to pitch Svengalis. And I was a pretty good pitchman, but I used to, before I became a pitchman, carrying what they called our own tripes and keister. Tripes and keister meant carrying our own table that we would stomp it up, or one of us would bend down. There's where the word keister comes from, because he'd do the tricks on your backside, near your backside.
Oh, right.
Okay? So the word keister is a slang word, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, what I learned, the story about doing a double lift when I shouldn't have, I'm watching a guy doing a Svengali pitch, and one of the people in the audience takes out, other people leave, and some people buy. And one guy takes out $1, and the pitchman says, oh, and another trick you can do, incidentally, with the deck. And he does another quick trick with the Svengali deck. And the man that was going to buy it, that's holding the bill, he said, very good, give me a moment to think about it. And he walks away with his dollar bill. He doesn't buy it. Again, lesson taught. You idiot. The guy's got a dollar bill under your nose. Take the dollar bill.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
That's it. Like I'm saying, I learned, he didn't have to do another trick. That the guy has got the dollar bill, he's buying the thing. You lost that sale.
Yeah.
You want to show him another trick? Take the dollar bill and then show him the other trick. So this thing with the girl who walked out on me, went, oh my God, I thought, I'll never forget that. I'll never make that mistake.
That's a fantastic story. That is so funny.
And the things you learn, right? Live and learn.
Yeah. I mean, it's what's the say? Less is more.
Yeah. I learned, I've been very fortunate. I learned quickly, maybe making a mistake, once I bought a pack of cigarettes once, and I gave the lady, those days a pack of cigarettes was, 45 cents, let's say. So I give the lady, I could still visualize her. I give her a $5 bill, which I had taken. I was very young. I started smoking when I was 8. I'll tell you that story if we have time. But I was in my late teens or something like that. And I give her a $5 bill. She gives me the pack of cigarettes. She goes into the cash register. She gives me change of $1. I say, no, I gave you $5. She says, no, you didn't. Get the heck out of here. I have other people waiting online. And I lost the $5 bill. And that was very important to me at that time. And you know how it changed I think I wrote about this, and before I forget, I got into the habit of whenever I gave out a large bill, I didn't bother with $5 bills, but let's say a $20 bill. As I handed it out, I memorized the serial number.
Very good.
And you know something? It worked for me once in my life. I'm again paying for something, I forget what. The lady gives me change of $5. I had given her this $20 bill, and I say, no, where's the rest of the change? She says, no, I just gave it. I said, I gave you $20, but she says, no, you gave me $5. Now, there's a whole bunch of people. She's talking loud. I'm talking loud. We're attracting people. I say, I'll tell you what. if you look at the top $20 bill in your register right now, and if it doesn't say J4837K, then I'm going to leave you alone. She takes it out, and I see her turn red. I guess she made an honest mistake, not trying to, be a crook. And she gives me the other $15. So live and learn, Paul.
That's very good. That's a good lesson. And
Right. Memorize your $20 bill serials. You want to hear another story about money? I'm at the Little Club. It's any of these things. I don't know if you have other questions to ask. So if you remember my cliche, it's hard to start Harry Lorayne, but it's harder to stop him. If you want to stop me, just say so, okay?
Well, we've actually only got a few minutes left, Harry. So can I suggest, can we continue another time?
Sure.
But just to round this up, I'm sorry for interrupting you. We only have
No, that's okay.
But just so I can wrap this up to the people watching, we are really blessed to have Harry here and to say yes to do the interview. Please check his magic out if you don't know it, because you'll be beautifully surprised. And I suggest if you're a kind of a YouTube young magician and you're very shy and quiet, if you read Harry's books, they will inspire you to get out and meet people, do magic, and get on with your lives, really.
They can learn. Can I mention a website?
Yes.
Harry Lorayne, you got to spell it right, of course, Lorayne. Harry Lorayne at magic.com. And at that website, there's all about my memory books and my magic books. You just click on the one you're interested in.
And have a look at it, everybody, because you're going to, there's so much good stuff there. And I want to say thank you to you, Harry. And have you got a last few words to say to the people watching as a goodbye?
Nothing really. I mean, I like to say that again, it would sound very egotistical, but you just said it. You want to learn good impromptu. Excuse me, I get so emotional. You want to learn good impromptu card magic. That's what I teach. That's what I've written, and all the books that I've written. I keep saying all the books. This could be the final thing I say to you, and I say final because the title of my last book is "And Finally!" ! And somebody asked me for some reason not too long ago, Harry, how many books have you written? And this is interesting. I said, I'm really, you want a definite number? He said, yeah. I said, I don't know. We took out "And Finally!" because it's my last book. And as you know, at the beginning of the book, it says books by the author. So it says books by Harry Lorayne. And all my magic books and my books on memory training are listed there. And here's the point. You ready for this? We counted them. 52, a deck of cards.
Really?
I've written 52 books.
Well, you couldn't script that, could you?
Yeah, there you go. That's what I mean.
That is wonderful. Well, that's a fantastic story, a fantastic way to end. Harry, there's so many magicians worldwide who owe their careers to you. And I hope they all say thank you as much as I say thank you, because it's very easy in life just to take things for granted. Just a huge thank you to you for giving me a teenage years that has just continued, and I'm ever so grateful. God bless you, and I hope we can do this another time, and thank you.
Be my pleasure, Paul. I'd love to see you and love to talk to you.
Bless you. Thank you, Harry.
My pleasure.
So that's it, Harry. Thank you ever so much.
Are we off recording now? That was very good. Again, Paul, forgive me. I may talk too much, but I can't help it.
No, it's lovely. It's I like to hear it. They want to hear it.
Well, that's what I'm hoping, that the things I talk about and the stories I tell are interesting to people.
They are.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, absolutely. But you've got the experience that everybody can learn from, and they, I think a lot of people these days seem to be worried or frightened about learning from people with experience, as if it diminishes them. It doesn't diminish.
Well, I think it's the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, I see people doing magic on the internet. Oh, God save us, Yeah. And they think they're good.
Yeah.
But I think they're terrible, and they I don't know, they don't have the, just recently, and then tell me again if you have to cut this off. I came up with a thing where I show people, I had math professors say to each other, this guy's a mathematical genius, talking about me. But it's a trick that I wrote in Mathematical Wizardry. There was a thing when I was very young, I did we used to call it a lightning calculation act. One of the things I did is I multiplied 3-digit numbers. And I did it with 365 here, 740, and 365 twice. Then the person would say 742 to multiply the 365 by, and another 3-digit number. And then I would look at it for a while, and I say, I really want to impress you. I got this one, and the total, I'm going to add the two totals, and I'm going to write it down. And I did, and I put it down. Then it took somebody a long time to figure it out. We didn't have calculators in those days to figure it out on paper. And of course, I had the right total. Why am I telling you this? It was a trick. I knew what the total was going to be when the first 3-digit number was given to me.
Yeah.
Okay, why am I telling you this? I'm watching not too long ago on TV, and there's a guy going to do this trick. Okay, he says to somebody, give me any 3-digit number. So the person says 876, and the great magician says, I'm going to write a prediction. In other words, he's going to write the prediction as soon. He gives away the whole point. The whole point being, I want to show you how I can do math in my mind. I'm a mathematical genius, which I say incidentally on my book, Mathematical Wizardry. Under the title, it says, how to prove that you're a mathematical genius when you're not.
Yeah.
And this idiot says, I'm going to write a prediction when he sees the first 3 digits. Gives away the whole point.
Ruins it.
That's one of the problems with the internet. You see idiots like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of it, and it's sad. Harry, this is going to click out now, so I apologise.
I'm unprepared.
All right.
What do you know? You have cards.
Do something.
Is it a full deck? This is called unprepared. Okay, one quickie. All right, Max? Everyone wants quickies nowadays. Talking about magic. So we'll try one quickie. You have to watch the card. Shuffle deck. Watch. I want to cut once. I want to cut twice. You tell me when to cut, Ken. Say cut.
No.
Right here. You tell me to do it, and you get miracles.